Right now in Russia, a quiet crisis is unfolding, more dangerous, more destructive than any battlefield noise. It's not happening across war-torn landscapes but inside the towering skyscrapers of Moscow's financial heart. The nation's supposed economic fortress, which Putin once claimed was unbreakable and immune to sanctions, is crumbling from within. Hidden behind closed doors, a covert disaster is brewing. Banks are sliding toward collapse, and the consequences are staggering. Today, we do not focus on explosions on the front lines. Instead, we reveal how Russian financial institutions are slipping into a state of virtual bankruptcy. This silent unraveling is driving millions of ordinary citizens to desperate measures, lining up at ATMs like the darkest days of the 1990s. But why? Why are the strongest banks suddenly shedding tens of thousands of jobs? The answers will shock you. Our journey begins on the streets of Russia. Queue after queue forms outside cash machines. People stand trembling, clutching their bank cards with trembling hands, an echo of a collapsing economy. These lines resemble the chaotic scenes from the past, when uncertainty ruled lives. The government's own data exposes how shattered public confidence has become. Since October 1, cash in circulation soared beyond 18.6 trillion rubles. Yet, what's truly terrifying is the speed of this growth. In just the third quarter alone, citizens withdrew 659 billion rubles in cash, 5 times more than the same period last year. Imagine that fivefold. In normal times, even a 10% increase would trigger alarms. But a 500% surge? That is catastrophe in motion. Why are Russians withdrawing their savings at this horrifying rate? Experts identify 3 alarming reasons, each worse than the last. The first is widespread fear of losing access to their money. People know the government can seize funds at any moment, whether through war taxes, bonds, or outright freezing accounts. The feeling is clear: you can't trust the bank anymore. And there's more. The second reason is what experts call digital detention. Banks freeze transfers, block even the smallest transactions, accusing account activity of suspicion. Citizens are summoned for questioning, forced to give up control of their own money. It's like living under a digital prison. The third reason is a return to primitive survival tactics, cash under the mattress. Inflation and chaos push people back into the unofficial economy, where physical money remains king. Cash still works, and the fear of losing access to digital assets is constant. Digital money can vanish in an instant, physical bills can't. Sergei Grishinin, head of the National Rating Agency, describes this as more than a temporary glitch. It's a fundamental rupture, an entire change in how Russians handle their finances. Deposits are evaporating, liquidity is draining away, the very lifeblood of banking is thinning. Meanwhile, the head of the central bank admits some anti-fraud measures have gone too far. Yet, the harsh reality remains: the financial system is gasping for breath, strangled by a liquidity crisis. Loan costs spike higher, banks tighten their grip on customers, closing their doors to protect dwindling cash reserves. It's a suffocating moment, yet the true impact lies in the lives overturned. Tens of thousands of workers are losing their livelihoods, the post of white-collar professionals are vanishing in this quiet storm. Russia's second-largest bank, VTB Group, has announced a harsh cost-cutting campaign. Though officials call it targeted and mere optimization, the truth is far grimmer. Their efficiency metrics skyrocket, costs rise sharply, profits shrink like a sinking ship. Entire divisions are being dismantled, jobs cut, families left in uncertainty. But the shockwave? It's coming from the nation's flagship, the giant state-controlled Sberbank. 1/5 of its staff is scheduled for layoffs by year's end. That's around 22,400 people from an already massive workforce of over 112,000. Overnight, thousands of livelihoods vanish. What's driving this mass downsizing? Better technology? Modernization? Or is it the stark reality that money has simply run out? The message is clear for those watching: the regime's safety net is unraveling. This war-driven economy, once believed to be resilient, is collapsing under its own weight. Putin's plan relied on oil and gas revenue fueling the military machine and maintaining social stability. But those revenues are fading fast. Energy sanctions and attacks on refineries have turned off the oil tap. Meanwhile, the costs of war escalate daily, swallowing billions. Every explosion consumes more rubles. Adding fuel to the fire, the central bank has raised interest rates to astronomical levels, now exceeding 21%. The idea? Stifle inflation and support the ruble. But the side effect? Lending freezes, banks avoid risk, profits dwindle or vanish altogether. Bad loans pile up in the dark corners of banks, with some institutions drowning in overdue debt. Shocking figures reveal the depth of this crisis. Moscow Credit Bank, the sixth largest in the country, faces a nightmare: over 668 billion rubles in overdue bad loans. That's more than double the ratio seen during the 2008 crisis, when the entire system nearly collapsed. Today, the bad loan ratio at this bank is soaring to 12.3%, compared to just 3.8% in that disastrous year. This is no minor glitch or passing storm. It's a hole in the very fabric of Russia's economy, an abyss of overdue debt and disappearing trust. The Kremlin's narrative that sanctions only strengthen Russia is exposed as a hollow lie. The wake-up call is clear: the once indestructible economy is crumbling, and the truth cannot be hidden behind state propaganda any longer. As the financial chaos deepens, the question becomes unavoidable. How long can the illusion of stability last? Can Russia's economy, built on energy, war, and silence, cope with the mounting realities of collapse? The answer is hidden in the shadows of skyscrapers, in the empty bank branches, where the silence is deafening and deadly. Previous segments explored how Russians are pulling their savings from banks, driven by fear of account freezes where the state can seize funds anytime, calling it a war tax or forced bonds. Imagine the chilling grip of state overreach, where every ruble under your mattress feels like a rebellion against invisible chains. Do you hear the whispers of suspicion in crowded branches? Smell the stale air of interrogation rooms as tellers question your every transfer? Feel the rough edges of cash clutched tightly, a tactile shield against digital tyranny. That's the second nightmare haunting Russians: digital detention. Banks freeze tiny sums under fraud pretexts, dragging citizens in for interrogation. Using your own money? You must account to the state first. Unsettling, right? Like a cage disguised as security. Thirdly, echoes of the turbulent 1990s return, an unwelcome flashback. Inflation's bite and endless uncertainty drive folks to stash under mattresses. Cash endures, tangible, untouchable, immune to vanishing pixels. Digital rubles? They're fickle ghosts, poof, gone in a blink. Sergei Grishinin, head of the National Rating Agency, NRA, labels this no fluke but a seismic shift in financial habits. Citizens bail. Cheap deposits dry up. Liquidity, banks' oxygen, suffocates. Even central bank chief Elvira Nabiullina concedes fraud curbs went overboard. Yet reality bites hard. The Russian banking realm chokes on liquidity drought. Loans skyrocket in cost. Borrowing? Excruciating. Banks shutter doors, hoarding scraps of cash like starving guardians. This feels like economic strangulation. A silent strangler tightening its grip. Beyond raw numbers and plunging percentages, the crisis bears its teeth: thousands unemployed. White-collar workers, Putin's steadfast base, now casualties of this tsunami. Russia's second-largest bank, VTB Group, slashes ruthlessly to endure. Deputy Chairman Dmitry Payinov spins it as targeted optimizations. But beneath the gloss? Horror. Costs soared to 65.7% of income in October 2025, from 52% last year. Every earned kopeck devoured by inefficiencies void. VTB acts as retail wings, culls operational ranks. These minor cuts? Families shattered, livelihoods erased in waves. Now, brace for the flagship's quake. Sberbank, state giant, axing 20% of staff by 2025's end. Employing 112,000 in 2024? That's 22,400 souls, enough to fill a massive stadium, thrust into limbo. Downsizing, they claim. AI, progress. Really? Code for bankruptcy blues. Wars tolling Gulf's office towers, not just trenches.
Loyalists, stability icons, now burdens excised coldly. If Sberbank can't shield its own, trust evaporates. How will mom and pops fend? Layoffs kindle 1990s trauma anew. Wages hit ATMs instantly.
Businesses dodge taxes, fees, freezes with cash under tables.
Shadow economies bloom as norms crumble. Russia slips backward, from digital dawn to financial dark ages. A crumbling superpower pretends otherwise. Yet, this isn't isolated decay. Experts eye Moscow Credit Bank, asset giant number 6, mired deeper than 2008's Washington Mutual implosion. Data screams truths Kremlin shrouds. Funds bled dry.
Assets at 5.45 trillion rubles, yet 668 billion in rotten loans. Historical horror, 2008's 3.8% toxic ratio was disaster's brink.
Here, 12.3% bankruptcy in math, rot sustained by Kremlin's crutches.
A 668 billion void gapes in Russia's core.
What twisted fate awaits next? Will Putin's sanctions-proof fortress crack completely, exposing lies beneath?
The air thickens with looming storm sounds, rumbles of dissent, acrid scent of untethered fear, cold touch of forfeited dreams.
In this vortex, where does the implosion halt? A regime's unraveling begins with one more shuttered vault, one more paycheck vanished. What silent force could fracture it further? Is the people's awakening the blade that finally falls?
The financial chaos continues to deepen, and now it is hitting the heart of Russia's economy, its banks and the people who rely on them. The once stable pillars are crumbling, and the economic landscape is shifting beneath our feet.
Every day, the number of unemployed rises, families face uncertainty, and the very essence of trust falters.
The second largest bank in Russia, VTB Group, has announced harsh measures aimed at survival.
Officially, they say it's just strategic staff adjustments.
Behind the scenes, it's much darker. The bank's efficiency metrics have soared. Its cost-to-income ratio surged to 65.7% in October 2025, up from 52% last year. That means the bank is spending more, much more, for every ruble it earns.
Profits are being swallowed by inefficiency like a voracious black hole. To survive, VTB is drastically shrinking its retail divisions and laying off thousands of employees. What sounds like standard cost-cutting is a catastrophe for many families. Thousands are already losing their livelihoods, slipping into unemployment overnight. But the storm's true force is yet to come. The flagship state-controlled giant, Sberbank, has revealed plans to cut 20% of its workforce by the end of 2025.
Picture this: in 2024, Sberbank employed around 112,000 people. A fifth of that, roughly 22,400 workers, will be cast aside. That's an entire stadium of people suddenly without jobs, without income, with their futures shattered in a matter of months.
The question that hangs in the air: why are so many losing their livelihoods? Is it artificial intelligence? Modernization? Or the harsh reality that the money has run dry? The answer is grim. It's a quiet admission: there is no more money. The war economy has drained the treasury.
These layoffs aren't just about cutting costs, they reflect a brutal attempt to stay afloat in a drowning economy. These workers, once seen as symbols of stability, are now considered excess burdens. Loyal supporters of the regime, they are now being pushed out, discarded like yesterday's news. This mass termination is more than just economic trauma, it threatens the very foundation of society's trust. If even the largest banks can't shield their employees, who remains safe? How can small businesses survive when the giants of finance are collapsing? The fabric of everyday life is stretching to its breaking point, pushing citizens into a new world where cash replaces digital, and survival means returning to the old days of barter and barter-like trades.
The chaos intensifies. Banks are bleeding liquidity.
The whisper of despair grows louder.
As the system frays and job losses mount, a haunting question echoes: is this the end of Russia's financial saga? Or just the beginning of a collapse nobody saw coming?
The consequences threaten to reshape the entire society, and no one knows if there's any way back from this abyss.
The collapse of trust in the financial system is accelerating rapidly.
Just as citizens rush to withdraw their savings, a shadow of chaos looms. People are converting their salaries into cash immediately, clutching bills like lifelines. Businesses are forced to revert to cash transactions, dodging taxes, bank fees, and the ever-looming threat of account freezes. The informal economy is surging, becoming the new normal amid the chaos. Russia seems to be slipping backward away from the digital age and into a pre-modern era. The message is loud and clear: banks are crashing, jobs are vanishing, and the government appears powerless to shield its people. Once this truth hits home, no propaganda can hide it anymore. It's as if the foundation of the regime itself is cracking apart. Long before these crises erupted, experts warned that Russia's banking system was teetering on the edge. The leading indicator? Moscow Credit Bank, the sixth largest in the nation. Once a sturdy giant with assets surpassing 5.45 trillion rubles, it now drowns in a swamp far darker than the 2008 collapse of Washington Mutual. The numbers tell a horrifying story, one the Kremlin desperately tries to conceal. Open-source data reveals a bleak reality: the bank is sinking fast. It carries 668 billion rubles in overdue, bad loans, a figure that defies belief. To grasp the magnitude, recall that during the global financial crisis, the worst failed bank in history, Washington Mutual, had a bad loan ratio of just 3.8%. Today, Moscow Credit Bank's ratio has skyrocketed to a deadly 12.3%. That's a clear mathematical sign this institution isn't just struggling, it's collapsing from the inside out. What does this mean for millions of ordinary Russians? The system is unraveling. The financial safety net is threadbare. As the real state of the banking sector becomes undeniable, the bigger question looms: how much more can the nation's economy take before chaos erupts fully? The silence that's been building, more dangerous than the sound of artillery, may soon be shattered by the unavoidable crash of the entire system. The situation in Russia's banking sector has reached a chilling stage. A shadowy crisis is unfolding beneath the surface, one far more deadly than any battlefield. While the world hears the roar of artillery and the chaos of conflict, an invisible storm is tearing through Moscow's financial heart. Banks are collapsing from within, and the fallout is quietly devastating millions. Imagine this: a giant black hole, 668 billion rubles deep, yawned open inside Moscow Credit Bank. Historians recall 2008's nightmare, the collapse of Washington Mutual, which pushed the global economy to the brink. Back then, bad loans made up just 3.8% of total assets. Now, at Moscow Credit Bank, that figure has skyrocketed to 12.3%. That's more than triple the rate of a year ago. It's a sign of something far worse: a bank rotting from the inside. This alarming ratio confirms it is on the verge of total failure, sustained only by the Kremlin's desperate artificial breath. That 668 billion rubles isn't just a number, it's a monumental abyss threatening to swallow the entire financial system. This black hole highlights how deep the crisis really is, a core failure shaking Russian stability to its foundations. As experts analyze these figures, a harrowing picture emerges. The country's economy is bending under its own weight, not due to external sanctions alone, but because of a disastrous collapse of its own doctrine. For years, the Kremlin insisted that Western sanctions only made Russia stronger, that self-sufficiency was possible. They claimed the Fortress Russia policy could withstand anything, that isolation was the key to survival. Yet, the evidence screams otherwise. The layoffs of 22,400 employees at flagship banks, the plunging profits, and the gaping black hole in Moscow Credit Bank's assets undermine this illusion. Putin's game was simple: funnel money from oil and gas into the military. Supplied with subsidies, the people were told to feel secure. But that facade is cracking fast. Revenue streams are vanishing. Ukraine's strikes on refineries, coupled with energy sanctions, have closed the cash spigot. Meanwhile, the war's costs climb daily, devouring billions in rubles every single day. And the economic trap tightens. The central bank has raised interest rates to staggering levels, over 21%. These sky-high rates are meant to curb inflation and stabilize the ruble. But they come with a deadly side effect: banks can't lend money. Without loans, profits dry up, bad debts linger, and the entire system stalls.
What does this mean for ordinary Russians? The fabric of trust is unraveling fast. As banks fail and jobs vanish, millions face an uncertain future. The quiet desperation spreads across cities and towns. The dreams of stability turn into nightmares. This secret crisis isn't just about economic mismanagement, it's the unraveling of Putin's entire economic doctrine. It exposes the lie that Russia is invincible, that sanctions are no threat. It shows that behind closed doors, chaos is brewing. The question lingers: how much longer can this facade hold? And what will happen when the black hole finally swallows the last hope of stability? The countdown has begun. The shadows darken inside Russia's banks, and the true cost of this silent crisis is yet to be fully revealed. As the war rages on and costs skyrocket every day, a different crisis quietly unfolds behind closed doors, one that could threaten the very foundation of Russia's economy. Imagine the sound of hurried footsteps, murmurs of panic, and the cold touch of empty ATM screens. This is no longer just about soldiers on the battlefield, it's about a silent, deadly collapse creeping through the financial arteries of the nation. Deep within the heart of Russia's banking system, a grim reality is taking shape. Interest rates have surged to staggering heights above 21%, making it impossible for banks to lend money. When loans dry up, profits evaporate. Without profits, how can banks settle bad debts that now total over 12%, a figure unheard of since 2008? This financial paralysis threatens to choke the entire system, an invisible shutdown looming on the horizon. Experts warn that in this environment, businesses are forced into cash hoarding, diminishing liquidity even further. This could spiral into a catastrophic death loop: banks can't function, companies collapse, and chaos spreads. To stop the hemorrhaging, authorities have introduced draconian measures, capital controls under the pretext of fighting fraud, to trap money inside the system. But rather than stabilizing the economy, these restrictions stoke fears, prompting people to withdraw savings en masse. It's as if Russia has imposed its own economic blockade on its citizens, trapping them in a sinking ship. The more restrictions tighten, the more mistrust ignites. Fear spreads like an inkblot, transforming economic tension into social unrest. Meanwhile, plans for digital upgrades and AI investments seem futile amidst this chaos. Technology, once heralded as a savior, can't feed mouths or refill empty pockets. This fundamental liquidity crisis exposes a brutal truth: Russia's long-term war effort may be crippled. Without access to funding, soldiers' salaries go unpaid, defense projects stall, and internal dissatisfaction grows. A future where banks collapse isn't just a nightmare for investors, it's a looming threat to stability, fueling public anger. Imagine the scene: crowds lining up at ATM queues, trembling hands clutching banknotes, eyes wide with anxiety. Could these masses, once silent supporters of the regime, soon turn into a unified force demanding answers? Their growing frustration, concealed beneath layers of fear and uncertainty, might ignite a powerful movement. The question remains: will this financial chaos spark the downfall of a regime built on illusions of strength? Or will the state tighten its grip and suppress the rising storm? The answer is yet to be seen. What if the true threat to Russia isn't on the battlefield, but lurking quietly within its own borders? Imagine the sound of hurried footsteps, the rustling of paper money, and the hurried whispers of a nation slipping into chaos. As queues stretch for miles at ATMs, the real power of the state begins to unravel, not through guns or tanks, but through a silent, deadly collapse in confidence. This crisis isn't just about banks failing, it's about a country's hope evaporating. Russian citizens, once loyal and trusting, now clutch their cash tightly, afraid their savings might vanish overnight. The fear of frozen accounts and suspicious transactions has become their new reality. Many are returning to the pre-digital age, hiding cash under mattresses, convinced that digital money can disappear in an instant. The ancient fear lingers: will their savings survive the coming storm? Experts warn that the banking system teeters on the brink of total collapse. Banks like Moscow Credit are drowning in bad loans, with unpaid debts reaching staggering levels: 668 billion rubles in overdue payments. Once managing just 3.8% bad loans during the 2008 crisis, the current figure of 12.3% suggests an internal rot that cannot be fixed. Banks are suffocating under the weight of their losses.
Meanwhile, giant institutions such as VTB and Sberbank are slicing thousands of jobs, leaving workers stunned and desperate.
Sberbank alone plans to lay off roughly 22,400 employees, an entire stadium wiped out overnight. What does this mean for the ordinary citizen?
With jobs vanishing, the economy lost in the chaos, and trust shattered.
Turmoil spreads.
People rush to convert their earnings into cash, fearing future freezes and seizures.
Small businesses revert to cash payments, hiding from the prying eyes of an increasingly suspicious banking system.
This resurgence of the informal economy signals a nation losing its modernity, slipping back into economic chaos akin to the darkest past. But the truth is more shocking. Putin seems to be ignoring it all, fixated on prolonging the conflict in Ukraine while the country's financial foundation crumbles around him. Does he realize that the crisis in Moscow's financial core could ignite a rebellion, turning angry crowds into a formidable force? As the cracks deepen, the unthinkable looms. What if the regime itself begins to fall apart from within? The massive debt of 668 billion rubles in bad loans, combined with mass layoffs and surging cash withdrawals, show that a catastrophic storm is already forming. Behind the locked doors of banks, amid the flickering neon lights, lies a shattered empire.
The confidence that once held Russia together is evaporating fast. Citizens are losing faith in their leadership, and the emptying coffers are revealing the true cost of a war economy built on lies. The question remains, how much longer can this facade last before everything crashes? The silence you hear isn't just the lull before a storm, it's the tremor of a nation on the verge of collapse, its future, its savings, and its very identity dissolving before our eyes. In this dangerous game of political survival and economic demise, one thing is clear: as the banking system collapses, so does the myth of an indestructible Russia. The cracks are too deep, and the casualties are mounting: layoffs, unpaid debts, and shattered trust. The question is not if the system will fall, but when. And as this internal chaos accelerates, the world must ask, what comes after the downfall of an empire built on silence and secrets? In the coming days, the full extent of this financial disaster will become painfully clear. The crisis is not just a number game, it's a ticking time bomb ready to explode at any moment. As banks teeter on the edge, the entire war effort hangs by a fragile thread. The Kremlin's treasury is visibly draining, and every second that passes pushes Russia closer to chaos. What unseen forces are silently accelerating this collapse? Can Putin's government prevent the impending disaster, or is this the beginning of the end for Russia's stability? The clock is ticking, and the shadows of an economic storm are darkening the horizon. For those daring enough to face the truth, stay tuned for more revealing insights and strategic analysis. Subscribing and activating notifications will keep you in the know. Remember, speaking the truth often takes courage, but here, we face it head-on. The story is far from over, and the largest crisis Russia has ever faced may soon redefine its future entirely. Stay with us as this unfolding nightmare continues to develop. Thank you for watching.